Emmabet is a farmer who lives in an impoverished rural area where her family has grown the same crop for generations. Her land has suffered from a drought for months. Her crop has failed for the second year in a row. Now she has no harvest to sell and very little to feed her family. Emmabet has known hardships all her life. In the past, she has found temporary fixes so her family can survive. Those temporary fixes have included selling her livestock, pulling her children from school and sending them to work, seeking help from neighbors. But this is difficult when they're suffering from the same drought. Borrowing money from local moneylenders, but for a very high price. Relying on family in the nearby town to send her money. Now she is thinking of migrating with her children to the city with hopes of finding work. While some of these fixes are not ideal, she needs to feed her children. These traditional coping mechanisms are part of Emmabet's resilience, her ability to cope with crises, continue to thrive, and adapt to change. Some of the ways she copes in the short term put her and her family at higher risk to future shocks and deeper poverty. However, like billions of poor people around the world, Emmabet is forced to do what she can for their immediate survival. Emmabet is just one of millions of farmers worried about their future. These farmers will be the most affected by the impacts of climate change and natural hazards. For decades, developing countries have relied on reactive approaches to addressing disasters by diverting funds from national development budgets and relying on unsustainable relief and recovery assistance from international donors when disasters hit. This creates heavy burdens on governments. Funds for recovery are often insufficient and poorly targeted, not reaching those most affected. This approach does not encourage people to take action to reduce potential impacts of hazards before they strike. Can insurance help Emmabet and other poor households better manage their risk? Traditional insurance pays out based on actual addressed losses of the policyholder. It is usually unaffordable to the poor. Since the late 1990s, several pilot programs have been testing the use of index insurance. This pays out based on an independent measure, such as a certain amount of excess or deficit rainfall, a specific wind speed in the case of hurricanes, or livestock mortality for winter storms. This is called a trigger. With index insurance, there is no need to assess the losses of individual households. Administrative costs are reduced, making the insurance more affordable, and payouts come faster, allowing those affected to recover more quickly. Index insurance therefore holds the promise of strengthening the resilience of Emmabet. But there is more than one way to look at this complex issue, and a need to assess the lived experience of the poor against the promises. Index insurance breaks the poverty cycle by allowing people to make choices that are riskier but more profitable, and also encourages investments in disaster risk reduction. Are farmers really switching to more productive investments? Are there demonstrated links between risk reduction incentives and micro-level insurance programs? Index insurance reduces transaction costs and can be an affordable solution to protect the assets and livelihoods of the poor from disaster shocks. Is index insurance affordable for the people who really need it? According to the World Bank, of the estimated 4 billion people worldwide who live on less than $2 a day, fewer than 10 million currently have access to formal insurance from a regulated financial institution. Index insurance promises to be a scalable, sustainable solution to supporting adaptation of the poor. How do we make these programs successful and scalable for the farmer? To date, there have been very few successful scalability efforts at the farmer level. Index insurance is one way of transferring climate risk to the private sector, relieving some of the financial burden of governments and donor agencies. Little is known about how investments in developing index insurance programs compare to other climate risk management strategies, such as social protection and increased investment in disaster prevention. How can governments and donors be sure that they are making the most effective and efficient use of their limited resources? The promise of index insurance in building climate resilience of the poor is substantial, but there are many unanswered questions. To date, There has been no market-neutral, evidence-based analysis of how index insurance helps poor households manage risk. The World Bank is working with partners to explore these questions and generate evidence to inform the global debate on climate adaptation financing. We need this evidence to understand the role of index insurance in the wider context of building the social and climate resilience of the poor. It's not as simple as it may first appear. Most importantly, we should not forget Emabet. At its core, our question is, can index insurance transform her livelihood and help her escape poverty? And ultimately, can it help the millions of Emabets around the world who face increasing climate risk? Please join us in exploring these questions.